Hello and welcome once again to the Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamil Jivani, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday. We look forward to you liking, commenting, and sharing this program because there are ears that need to hear this message and eyes that need to see it as well. Ensure that Pierre Poilievre is the next Prime Minister of Canada. So please do that. Also tell your friends they can download the content on platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. Parliament has resumed, and that'll be the topic of our discussion today. We're back in session, and joining me today, our guest, kind of old news now, I guess, by-election winner, but great to have you, Jamil Jivani, Member of Parliament for Durham, my geographical next-door neighbor. Great to have you on the program.
Yeah, great to be here. I'm very pumped to be back in Ottawa and hopefully do our part to get an election going as soon as possible.
All right, let's talk election, because I think that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. Everyone's mind is thinking about it, almost ready to put this government out of its misery. And the NDP did a big flex during the dying summer months. Really didn't do much, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, of course, I think the NDP realizes that Justin Trudeau is incredibly unpopular. And now they're trying to distance themselves from the Prime Minister they've been propping up for years. It's the same reason why they changed their position on things like the carbon tax. Like, they know that they've been failing the people across this country who the NDP claims to be fighting for. They claim to be fighting for hardworking people. They claim to be fighting for the working class, the middle class, the unions, and they've been disappointing all of those people across this country. And now they're trying to backtrack. And they think Canadians have a short memory. I don't think we do.
Well, it's interesting, too, because the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador is going out against the carbon tax. The Manitoba Premier, NDP, has given residents in his province a break on the fuel tax, the provincial fuel tax. And now, to the astonishment of, I think, everybody, the NDP Premier is talking about a way out of the carbon tax in British Columbia, which is one of the highest in the country and causing misery for a lot of residents. It's amazing how we went from this has to happen and punishing people to, yeah, wait a second, people's lives are a lot harder because of it.
Yeah, and I think honestly it's because the Liberals and the NDP have been riding high on a reputation that I would argue is undeserved, but a reputation they've had for decades, for generations, where they're fighting for the little guy, they're doing their part to help people who need a hand up in our society. And now that they've been in power for 9 years and all these folks' lives have just gotten harder, the jig is up. You can't claim that you're fighting for the working class and the middle class, as the Liberals and the NDP have tried to do, when you're actively creating tax policies that make life less affordable for all of those people. And I think that's what we've seen on the carbon tax issue as it's evolved, is just more and more people realizing that this is not working. And now they don't have an alternative. And that's the thing that's being exposed, is that the Liberals and the NDP actually don't have an alternative. They are now just backtracking on promises they've made to their base about caring about the environment and exposing that the carbon tax was never about the environment, right? And it's really just a tax plan. Yeah, it's always been a tax plan.
Yeah, and we have been saying the same thing ever since the Liberals brought in the carbon tax, that it was, in fact, a tax plan, and that's all they had. And you're right, it's being exposed now, and people are seeing the effects of it. Every time it goes up, the cost of everything that is used, whether it be agriculture, transport, whatever, sees the subsequent increase in prices.
Exactly. You know, like, I was raised by a single mom. I grew up in a community where a lot of kids are raised by single moms. And I know how precarious life can be when you're in those tough economic situations where every dollar counts. Every dollar can be the difference between whether everybody gets to eat a full meal or not, or every dollar can be the difference between whether you get to pay rent or not. There's a growing number of people in this country who are going through that right now. Even full families working hard with 2 incomes are going through that right now. Food bank rates, usage rates are sky high. And so we're seeing more and more people in these tough economic situations. And I think it's almost like the NDP Liberal coalition is having its bluff called. Like, it's a very reasonable question for a Canadian to ask. Why is my life getting harder as this government is in power longer? And the NDP think they're going to be able to abdicate themselves from any responsibility for this. I do not think that Canadians are going to let them off the hook. You propped up a carbon tax economy for years, and you can't just disown that overnight. You've got to be held responsible.
Yeah, and I love just as we were getting to rise this past June, a few months ago, the NDP were trying out some new lines, right? The NDP is a vote for change, right? Like, that's the status quo. You're not changing anything. This is your agenda. This is what you wanted.
Yes, that is what I mean when I say they've had this reputation for decades.
That's right.
Where they've tried to make themselves, we're fighting the machine, we're fighting the man. Mm-hmm. And it turns out they're the man.
Yeah,
and they're best friends with the man. Yeah. And they helped the man stay in power for 9 years. Like, this is not fighting the man.
That's
and
right.
I think Canadians, especially young Canadians, who know that the economy is stacked against them right now, who are anxious about whether they'll ever be able to buy a home at any point in their adult life, they're looking at the NDP and being like, you're not fighting the man. You're not fighting the status quo. You're not fighting for change.
Yep.
And they've been exposed. And I think that's what's happened. And you see them flailing right now, trying to figure out how to restore that reputation they used to have. But I think it's gone. I think our party, the Conservative Party of Canada, has now taken up that mantle. We fight for the little guy. We fight for the hardworking families. We fight for the working class, the middle class. And we're seeing that trend grow all across Canada. As more people get to know Pierre Poilievre, they see a man who has a plan to lead this country in a way that actually creates opportunity for those who don't have it right now.
Oh, absolutely. So let's go to the press conference where Jagmeet Singh was doing his little stunt, and let's cue up cut one. So he continued to just deflect on the simple question, would you vote in a non-confidence vote to trigger an election? He would not do that. So let's hear cut one.
What do you need to see from the fall economic statement or spring budget in order to support the Liberals on votes?
For any question around votes, we're going to make that determination on a vote-by-vote basis. So we're going to see what the government presents, and as an opposition party, we'll look at it, and then we'll make our decision. But because I ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau, I know this now means that an election timing has become more uncertain, more likely. And we know that that means people will have a choice to make.
So what the NDP did, I still can't understand this flex, right? Now they have no power at all. So, of course, the Bloc Québécois ran in, filled that gap, and so the NDP are just left in wilderness now. The strategy, I have no idea what they were thinking. I have no idea to get in the mind of a socialist, but that makes no sense. I can't make right or wrong of this.
Well, it seems to me that Jagmeet Singh thought this through as far as wanting to run around all summer saying he ripped up the agreement.
And talking tough.
That was the line he wanted to deliver all across the country. You didn't really think it through after that. So I don't think they have much of a plan.
No.
But I think you're right. As soon as they stepped back from that agreement and the Bloc Québécois then stepped in to fill the void, it exposed what we've been saying this entire time, which is that the Liberals could not be doing what they're doing without another party willing to prop them up. It was the NDP, now it's potentially the Bloc Québécois. I don't know. But what we do know for a fact is this is not just a Liberal problem. Mm-hmm. It has been an NDP Liberal problem because the Liberals just couldn't get what they've done without somebody else willing to have their back. And now they can say they ripped up the agreement all they want. I am sure we're going to give them plenty of opportunity to vote non-confidence in Justin Trudeau and non-confidence in the Liberal government. Let's see, are they actually willing to back up their tough talk, or are they is this all a show? Many people call this a stunt. Mm-hmm. We'll see if that's what it is or not, but that might wind up being the most accurate way to describe what Jagmeet Singh is up to.
Well, let's see if they get a backbone. Let's cue up cut two here. So this is Melanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, who I think is doing a terrible job and can't get her messages straight on what's going on in the Middle East, saying that Canadians want them to govern. Play cut two.
Canadians don't want elections. They just want us to do the job. They just want us to govern. And that's what we're doing. We're governing. We're taking tough decisions. Why? Because times are tough. And so, wait, let me finish. I'm speaking. So,
it's got to have that hard close at the end, but times are tough. Well, who's been in charge the last 9 years? Let me think.
Yeah, I mean, you know it's bad when a Liberal minister is having an uncomfortable moment with the media because usually it's smooth sailing.
Yeah, what's your favorite color? What do you have for breakfast?
Yeah. But even the media is having to ask him some questions now. And I mean, the reality is this. We just, this week, will have the newly elected Member of Parliament from Toronto St. Paul's, Don Stewart, the first Conservative to be elected there in 30 years, joining our caucus, being here in Ottawa. And that is a sign of how much even people who voted Liberal for a long time have lost confidence in this government. They can say that Canadians want them to govern. I would say most Canadians believe they're governing poorly. They're making bad decisions, and that is why people want change. There are real problems in this country. And when we talk about things like the carbon tax, or we talk about housing construction or stopping crime, the reason Canadians want an election is because we have problems that need to be fixed, and this current government's not fixing them.
Well, prior to Don Stewart's by-election in Toronto St. Paul's, it was yours. You must have heard all that at the doors, right? You could hear and see and sense there was a bubbling under the surface. That
Yes.
a lot of people are feeling a little anxious about the economy and the direction of the country.
Yes, and even people who would say to me straight up that they voted Liberal their entire life or they voted NDP their entire life. We're talking, retired union workers or people who recently moved to Durham from places like Toronto, and they would say, we need a change. I mean, there clearly needs to be a change right now. And they're not saying it because they're obsessed with politics. This is not about politics for them. This is about their families. This is about what is the country we're leaving behind for the next generation, and genuine concern over the direction of this country. That is what I detected when I was knocking on door after door after door, when we were at community events, even throughout the summer. It was my first summer as an MP. I was running around as MPs do during summertime. Yeah, trying to meet as many people. Meet as many people as possible. And the number one message people had is, we need change. The status quo is not working. And that is the burden that Canadians are carrying right now, feeling like, man, what's happening? Like, where are we going from here? We're trending downward in so many metrics, and we need confidence that we have a government that can actually make that change. They do not have that confidence in the current government.
And one thing that did jump up was the unemployment rate, but more specifically, the youth unemployment rate is higher than I think many are comfortable with.
Absolutely. It's so frustrating to see that for years and years and years, the Liberal Party has tried to make any conversation about immigration policy a matter of race, even though people from all across the spectrum of different cultures and backgrounds want to have a serious conversation about immigration. As soon as we start pointing out the consequences that temporary foreign worker programs, high rates of student visas are having on the labor force, the amount of young people not getting access to opportunity because of the logjam in the labor market, all of a sudden the Liberals want to say, oh, we need to pivot on immigration. There have been people making this point for a long time. And the Liberals are the ones pointing a finger in their face and saying, you're a racist for even asking a question.
They were shouting down anytime you talked about that.
And now they want to, again, it's the same thing what we're seeing with Jagmeet Singh. These guys who've been in power for years think that we all have short memories, like we're all goldfish. We can't remember. Wait, weren't you the one who just made this decision 2 years ago? Yeah. And now you want to disown it and pretend that we don't remember that you were there every step of the way when things got worse. So these guys think they're going to evade accountability. And the reason why Canadians want an election is to hold them accountable and to bring in change. And that is what we're going to do.
Well, I remember there was the talk when the Liberals many years ago released the requirement for visas for visitors from Mexico coming into Canada. And the warnings were, people saying there's warnings about this, like just be wary. The Liberals during the summer put that back on. They did a whole bunch of things, brought in some of Jason Kenney's policies when he was minister back under their Harper about companies requiring a certain amount of domestic workers before they can even think about going to a temporary foreign worker or a foreign worker through different permits, et cetera. And again, like you just said, these voices were shouted down when they were brought up as reasonable arguments against a Liberal position.
Yeah. And that's what they do. It's the same thing that happened with the carbon tax. They said, oh, you don't care about the environment. It's like, what? We don't want people having to pay an increase in their grocery bill every month, their home heating bill every month. We have construction companies saying the carbon tax is making it more expensive to build the houses that Canadians need. And they want to say that this is an environmental issue. Well, we've said all along, you have a tax plan, not an environmental plan. But this is what they do. They put people who have reasonable objections to their bad policies in a corner, and they're used to people being afraid to push back. But now we've got a growing movement, a beautiful growing movement across Canada that is now saying, we're tired of it. And we're not putting up with this anymore. You're not going to bully us. You're not going to call us names. You're not going to point a finger in our face and get us to be afraid of telling the truth. And the truth is that the country needs change. And that is why we need an election. And as soon as they give Canadians the opportunity to vote, I am very confident that Canadians will send that message loud and clear from coast to coast to coast, change is needed.
Well, it seems like a couple of surveys during the summer pointed that out. Like, I think people have tuned out the Prime Minister, they've tuned out the Liberal Party, and they're just waiting to put this government out of its misery in the election.
Well, I mean, you even have Liberal MPs who are saying publicly that they don't even have confidence in their leader. I mean, that would be the interesting thing in a non-confidence vote. Will all the Liberals even vote to keep their own leader?
Maybe to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a growing number of people on their side who are saying that they're recognizing their party's not getting the job done, and Justin Trudeau is a failed prime minister. So, yeah, look, I know I'm not the only MP who's coming back to Ottawa this week saying the number one sentiment from my constituents is please give us an election now. Yeah. And I agree with them. I would love to have this election as soon as possible.
Yeah, I heard the same thing too. I have a few more topics to get in with you, but unfortunately we're out of time. It seems to always go fast. I appreciate
Maybe
that.
You'll invite me back and we can continue 100%. The conversation.
Well, it's a little nerve-wracking, a former broadcaster being interviewed. I don't know what it was like on the other side. Did you find it okay?
Yes. Great questions. Great clips.
Great clips. Yes, absolutely. Yes, you have to say that because you don't want to insult the host.
Appreciate it.
All right, Jamil. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. We'll get you back on. We'll talk about a few more things we can really dive into, especially the economy. A little shaky out there right now.
Yeah.
Jamil Jivani, Member of Parliament for Durham, Mike Geographical, next door neighbor. We appreciate his time. We appreciate yours as well. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this program. This message needs to be heard to ensure that Pierre Poilievre is the next Prime Minister of Canada. Tell your friends too. They can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. New content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, remember, it's low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.